You've been at some of the most important events in recent history. What would you say is the most memorable for you?
There's actually been quite a few. Being at the death of Nelson Mandela was a big moment. I was in Kunu in South Africa when Mandela was buried in his homeland in South Africa. That was a very moving and it felt a very sort of symbolic zeitgeist change of time, seeing Mandela goes. But in terms of big moments, I think the one that had the biggest impact on me was I was the BBC's Asia producer at the time. I was living out, I spent a number of years of my life living abroad in different bureaus for the BBC. But in 2004 I was based in Asia, in Singapore, when the tsunami happened, the big Asia tsunami. And I found myself going to Banda Aceh in Indonesia to be in charge of our BBC News operation on the ground. And 125,000 people died in Banda Aceh, and to arrive within 24 hours to that scene of devastation and to literally see tens of thousands of dead bodies, and it was really, really difficult. But you're aware that it's your job to tell that story for all these tens of thousands of people who've lost their lives. You are the conduit, you are the means for getting that story out, and for the lucky few who survived, to try to get the aid in, getting the reporting of the story out allows you to notify the world of this horrific thing that's happened, and that sort of opens the doors to politicians, to NGOs and others sort of putting money forward for aid, delivering aid and whatever. So I think being involved and running the news operation during the Banda Aceh tsunami was probably, for me, the most significant experience.
And from that, would you say that being a journalist is a very emotionally taxing job?
Yeah, it can be, and we are now acutely conscious, not just in the BBC, but in the media, the news media world generally, I think. We're a lot more conscious of the fallout of the job that we do on the journalists that we ask to go to report stories. So we do risk assessment. So in my job as the assignments editor, I'm deploying staff to very dangerous places, to Iraq, to Yemen, to northern Nigeria, Boko Haram territory. A risk assessment involves assessing the basic risks in terms of life and limb. You can never get rid of risk completely, but you can mitigate it to bring the risk level down, so that our constant equation is editorial value of a story against the risk that it is involved to get that story. And what you can't have is a story that is a nice-to-have story but not great editorial value, so it's down here, with high risk. We just won't deploy, won't send. Whereas a story might have very high editorial value, so we've got a team in Yemen at the moment to report on a very underreported story, the suffering of the tens of thousands starving and dying in Yemen. So very high editorial value, but with a very high risk. And so our job is to sort of bring that risk down. Now that team in Yemen, they not only face the physical risk, but they also face the risk of the fallout on them as individuals, as human beings, of what they're seeing and what they're reporting. Clearly there's an obvious risk of danger of a fallout of the fear. If you're under fire, if there are bullets flying, if you're worried that your life could be at risk, that creates a traumatic stress. But there's also the traumatic stress. I'll be honest about this. When I reported the Asian tsunami in 2004-05, to see tens of thousands of dead bodies, to have to move them, to make some space where you could pitch a tent, to, as I had to do, move dead babies with maggots crawling out of their eyes and their stomachs. It's stuff you never forget. And there is a thing called post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. I'm sure you've heard of it. I personally don't think I've ever had it. I might have done, I'm not sure I have. But we're very, very conscious of PTSD and the fallout of the journalistic job on the journalists who are doing it. So at the end of every deployment, we always have what we call a sort of call-in system. So I, as the assignments editor in charge of foreign news teams, when a team have finished a job, I will always call the producer and the correspondent cameraman and just have a chat with them, check how the trip went, check they're okay, and always allow them to know that we have services available in terms of counselling, support, etc. if they need to talk through and get things off their chest, because yes, it is. It's a taxing, it's a demanding job. particularly working in foreign news. Well, actually, I say particularly working in foreign news. Don't forget that, for my BBC Home News colleagues last year, was it last year? Yeah, last year it was a very difficult time. If you think we had all those attacks at the same time, you had the attack on the Ariana concert in Manchester, the Westminster Bridge attack, the Waterloo attack in Borough Market, not far from where you are, obviously, and the home teams deploying there when they're seeing injured people, wounded people, dead people, crying people. That has an impact on the journalists who are reporting it. So we are acutely conscious at the BBC, but colleagues as well in rival news organisations too, very conscious of the fallout in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, and do everything we can to ensure that the journalists are properly supported after a story. So we don't just expect them to come back and go on shift the next day. We allow people to decompress, take time to get things off their chest, make sure that they've processed what they've gone through, and so that they are in a proper mental state as well as a physical state to do the next job.